So at this point, I know we have a section dedicated for Q&A, but I've got about 8 minutes left in this session. So do we want to start the Q&A session now, or do you want me just to take questions about fragments?
Hey, Kevin. So thank you very much. That was awesome, first and foremost. So on behalf of Silect and all the attendees here today, thank you very much. Presentation was awesome. We do have some questions that are on topic related to fragments. So I'd ask the audience attendees, if you have some questions on fragments, submit those the way you have already through the application. And we're going to go through some of those, and then at approximately 11, we will roll into Ask the Experts. It'll be more, you could ask questions on any topic. If you want to ask what Kevin needs for breakfast, we could go there, but let's try to keep it technical if we can. So, Kevin, I'm going to read some questions for you here. The first one comes from Jonathan Almquist. And the question is the scenario. Customer sends a list of 100 services. All services in the list start with ABC and end with a GUID. These services need to be distinctly discovered and monitored. Okay, so think multi-instance. Can this be accomplished using a single fragment that implements regex?
I believe, well, the answer is yes, because a fragment can contain any multitude of things. So you could have 100 discoveries and 100 monitors in a single fragment. So, but for that specific example, there are two things. One is you said it needs to be discovered, and the other one is it needs to be monitored. Now, that may or may not be the case. It depends on what the customer requirement is. If the customer wants them discovered as like an instance of their own class, yes, we can do that through a WMI wildcard. That will take a regex or script-based discovery, whichever one. And then from the monitor, we can then pass that property of the discovered service name as a parameter to the service monitor. So you absolutely could create one for that. Brian Wren actually wrote an article years ago on that, and then I took it, and I have a blog post which basically does wildcard-based service monitoring. So could that wildcard-based service monitor be turned into a fragment? Sure, it could.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And let's move on to, we're going to look for some topical questions here. So bear with me. We'll just find those from the list. Okay.
So do you want me to just go through this list that we have so far?
Sure, if you can.
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Yeah, absolutely.
Got that, Kevin. Okay.
Yeah, I've got it. So, so the question is, we use the contents of custom fields and alerts to provide variables for automating our ticket generation. Is that available to input those custom field contents in alerts from rules? And how about alerts from monitors? So one of the things to understand about any authoring tool, no authoring tool, no matter how cool they write it, will overcome the limitations of SCOM itself. And one of the problems with custom fields and alerts, and I don't really know why this is the case, but custom fields in alerts from monitors are not available at the time the alert is generated. So that has to do with the alert module. That's kind of been a sticking point in SCOM for a long time. And so what customers to depend on custom fields, they generally use a connector. We used to have this connector called the Alert Update Connector, and there's actually community solutions that have far surpassed that and work in all the new platforms, including SCOM 2016. Mark Manti has actually written some really cool stuff around that. So for modifying custom fields after the alert is generated, not at the time of alert generation. So Silect cannot overcome that problem for monitors. Now for rules, you should be able to come in here, and so like, do you guys still see my screen? Am I still sharing?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. So let me show, like, I can pick this event-based rule, and I can choose just edit XML, and the custom fields are available to you in XML. If I'm generating and if I had a fragment, I could totally put custom fields in that fragment. So that would be available to you. If I'm generating like a new Windows event rule, I don't know if you guys expose custom fields on the alert or not. Let me just walk through that real quick. I don't know if anyone from Silect knows.
Yeah, we do. I know.
Okay, there you go. So we're going to get there. There we go. Yeah, so here's custom alert fields right here. And so that's totally available to you when you're generating a new one. And oh wow, they've even got browsers for different data types, target class properties, and the host of the class. So this is even cooler. They make it easy to populate data this is like a variable, like so the NetBIOS computer name, so it's got all this gobbledygook. But what that does is that's going to resolve at runtime to the Windows NetBIOS computer name into a custom field. So yeah, they totally support that. All right, so the next question, is there a way to track the process instance typically in a multi-process scenario? No. And so that's a great question. What you're talking about is, what if I have an application that has 10 processes all under the same name, and I want to know if a specific process ID fails, or if one out of those 10 fail, I want to know what the process ID was that failed, or something unique. Maybe that process has a unique command line. So that's not possible. And it's not a limitation of Silect, it's a limitation of the process monitoring module in SCOM. The process monitoring module in SCOM is very simple. It really just looks for basic information. If it collected process ID and like things like executable binary path and things like that, I could provide that, but the module doesn't output that data, so I can't provide it. So I have written a management pack specifically for a customer scenario, just exactly like what you're describing, and I had to use script-based monitoring. There was just no other way to do it. So I used a native PowerShell module that ran a PowerShell script that got the information, and then it would output the process monitoring data that you wanted. So a little more heavy-handed than a native module, but there's really no other way to get it unless a module exists or you wanted to write your own module. Okay, so the next unanswered question, can we only create new performance collection rules, or can we also relate our app class to existing performance collectors? So in our example, the Microsoft printing stack already collects print queues, so it wouldn't make sense. Oh, so of course, I was just using that as an example to collect print queue. You can absolutely relate that to anything you want. I was just kind of picking an existing perf counter. If you already have a management pack that you now want, that you've written a bunch of perf collection rules for, and you now want to point it to target this class that you've created in a fragment, the only way to do that is by editing XML. There's not going to be a simple way. The cool thing is you can open up that management pack and just do a find and replace, or you can bring that XML into your custom management pack, but it would have to be done at the XML level. Absolutely, it would not make sense to collect duplicate data. I was just doing that specific for this example. I hope that answered that. If you have several applications that all monitor Windows services, is it a better practice to break them in different MPs or bundle them together? So you're going to get into some opinion. I won't say there's a best practice here, and I'm certainly not one that gets to dictate best practices, but my opinion is I want all applications that I'm monitoring to be separated into separate management packs. And so I don't look at, I'm just monitoring Windows services. You know, I may have 100 custom requests for Windows services. I look at it as I am monitoring applications, and those applications are important to my business units. The reason I want to separate them is so that when that application goes away or doesn't exist anymore in the environment, I can just delete that management pack. I'm not going in onesie twosie editing specific services, because if you don't break them up into application specific things, you'll lose track of, is this even valid anymore for my environment? I'm running massive amounts of XML that don't apply to anything anymore. So my best practice, my personal advice, is always to create separate management packs for each app and make sure there's an owner in your company that is assigned to that management pack. That you always have somebody who's the point of contact for that MP or that app, so you can make sure that it's up to date, that nothing's changed with the app, that the app still exists, things like that. Why does RegKey take too long to discover? I don't think it takes long at all. RegKey discovery is super fast. It uses a native module. In fact, when I gave this example today, I did the RegKey discovery. I guess it's relative on what you think is long. When you import a management pack that has a registry key discovery, what happens is the agents get notified that their config is dirty. They request new config. The config comes down and says, hey, I've got this management pack for you. They request the management pack. They download it. They apply it. And then they execute the discovery. And then they submit the discovery data. And then SCOM commits that to the database. And we have the existence of a class. In most environments, that process can complete in 5 to 15 minutes. So to me, that is fast. Let's see. The next one, I think, I think I'm good.
It's tricky to follow. I see one at 10:55 from Jared Shippey there.
So I have, does Kevin have plans to expand on the Unix fragment options? I absolutely will. I just need to know what people want. So I've only written a handful, and everything that I've written for customers. So customers, my Microsoft customers have come to me. They're using fragments. They've been using fragments for 6 months to a year now. They'll come to me with requests and say, hey, I want a fragment that does this, or the community will come to me. And if I have availability and I have time, then I add to that. But I also want to make it clear that anybody can build fragments, right? So certainly if you're just getting started, you're going to be a consumer of fragments. But the more you use them, you'll see the power. You'll be able to start building your own fragments. Let's see. Do you have .NET?
Kevin,
yeah.
Yeah, if you don't mind me jumping in to add on to that question. A little bit later today at 12:15, we will be presenting on authoring fragments. So as Kevin says, it'll take time to go from a consumer of fragments to authoring fragments, but I think you'll find some really good information there. I also should mention that Kevin had access to an early beta, so some of the things that you saw in there may not be available if you own MP Author Professional today. You may not see all those same things. We will have a beta available later, and I'll talk about that later. Thanks, Kevin.
No problem. I didn't want to spill any beans there, so careful. Yeah. So, all right. So, do you have .NET APM specific fragments? I don't. Michael, I've never had a request for that. So, APM workflows are a little bit different, but at the end of the day, they should be XML. If it's XML and it goes in a management pack, it can be fragmentized. So I don't have any, but I don't know of any reason why it couldn't be done. The only challenge there might be, let me think. The APM is a wizard, and all that wizard does is create XML. So yeah, I'd have to look at that to see if the wizard is doing anything that's making very unique code that is proprietary. If it's not, and the XML is straight up XML, you could totally make fragments from it. I have the need to create a monitor which will collect data from a PowerShell script but raise an alert only after conservative setting. Yeah, that's totally possible in SCOM. So what you're saying is you want a PowerShell-based monitor, but to have consecutive samples. So there's actually 2 different ways to do that. You can use there's a module, a consolidation module. It's complicated to use, but there's actually a new thing that several people have blogged about called match count. And it's a condition detection that can be added to a lot of different workflows that make creating consecutive samples really easy. So I don't think I have an example of that. Monitor performance. So consecutive samples uses the consolidator module. I have PowerShell scripts, but I don't think I have match count in the XML as a condition detection in the monitor type. No, No, I sure don't. I just have, yeah, good condition back. So these are really simple, but that totally could be a fragment. So that's a great community request to say, hey, can you take your TimeScript PowerShell monitor and add a condition detection that will allow multiple samples before raising a thresh, before breaching, the alarm. Okay.
Kevin?
Yep.
Your monitor service with alert, ignore, disabled fragment does have a match count of 2 under suppression settings.
All right, a monitor service with ignore to say. Okay, this was something I wrote for a very specific customer request. So let's look, the data source, the probe action, yeah. I don't check startup, configuration.
Line 101.
What's that?
Line 101.
Oh, I missed it then. 101. Yeah, there we go. Suppression settings match count. Okay, so that's I added that to the condition detection, right? It's not a dedicated condition detection like the consolidator module would be. So I'm talking about a lot of garbage that a lot of you guys don't probably understand. That's not that important. What matters is this little baby right here. So that's how you can take a condition detection of bad and add a requirement of a specific number of iterations based on the timer interval of the monitor itself. Thank you. How to use custom PowerShell monitor can be configured through MP Pro. It sure can. So let me cancel out of this. And now, again, it's custom PowerShell, so you have to provide the PowerShell. But what I did is I have an import fragment. I can browse, and I can say monitor TimeScript PowerShell. So I'm going to choose that one. I don't have to provide any data. It automatically populated everything, right? And if I look in the XML, I'll see, oh, here's a PowerShell script, but it's basically an empty script that just shows you the structure that's necessary to output something called property bags. So you provide the PowerShell, you just have to format it so it outputs the right kind of data that SCOM can consume. So, sorry, let me go ahead and import that, and then I'll show you how you would use that. So I can, once I've imported it, I go into monitors, and I can see here's my TimeScript PowerShell monitor. And I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to choose this Show All Elements button. So right-click, Show All Elements, and Module Types. And here's my PowerShell data source and probe action. So you would have to have some familiarity with the fragment to know that the script is in the probe action. And in this case, I can just edit my XML. And at this point, I can edit the script. So here's, the script name and the script body. So, and this is just like a construct script that I provided to make it easier. So provide your definition, add any constants you need to. I always gather the start time of the script, who's running the script. So, this is good for troubleshooting information. I load some SCOM specific stuff that's required. I log an event that we're starting the script. And here I'm just setting the condition to be bad, right? And then in my script, I just say, if it's good, we're good. If it's bad, we're bad. And then output the property bag, which I did this bag add value. So you have to know a little bit about SCOM scripting. There isn't a simple way. If you don't know about SCOM scripting, then use Silect's tools that let you just suck in a script. That they're a little bit easier, but even in that scenario, I think you still have to output a property bag. Yeah. So there's no way around it. You have to learn a little bit about SCOM scripting. You can run native PowerShell, but you just have to tell SCOM how to interpret the output of your PowerShell. Hope that makes sense.
Kevin, worth mentioning is that we did a whole webcast on script monitoring, PowerShell monitoring specifically, and I think people will be able to find that on the Silect YouTube channel.
Okay, cool. Yeah, there's tons of examples out there. For how to do a script-based monitor in SCOM, you would just need to understand the concept of property bags and how to take your PowerShell and put them in property bags. It's actually really, really easy. If I can figure it out, anybody can. So, okay, when creating custom data sources and monitor types, on which one can create unit monitors, should the fragment contain the data source and monitor type as well, or a different library? Man, that's a great question. It's an advanced authoring concept. It's something that bothers me greatly about fragments in general, because the whole model of SCOM is to create data sources, probe actions, and monitor types, and put things like those in a type library and seal it so that other management packs can reference those and create powerful monitors and reuse those types in the library over and over again without recreating lots of XML that does the same thing over and over. So the answer to your question is both. You can have one or the other. So if you create a fragment and there's an existing library and an existing monitor type that meets your needs, there is no need to bring that into your fragment. The reason you would bring those into your fragment is if you don't like something about the ones that we provided and you want to create your own. So then you have a choice to make. Once I create my own data sources and monitor types, do I want to seal that and make it my own custom library and then reference it with my custom fragments? We're getting complicated. Or do I just want to keep it simple, and if I'm going to customize my data source and monitor type, I'll just reuse that over and over, and I understand that my XML is slightly less efficient because every time I use this monitor, I'm including a monitor type and a data source and a probe action that all kind of is repeated across multiple management packs. So it's kind of an argument in what's most efficient, but I have not seen any negative side effects of doing that. The only argument for not doing that would be you never want a management pack that's like an XML-based management pack that's huge, because then when you make changes to it, it can actually impact SCOM's performance. So you really want to limit the size of unsealed management packs that you change on a regular basis. So if it's something you're changing all the time, you have to be cognizant of that, but it's not a huge issue one way or the other. You're really getting into MP theory at that point. Okay, I hope I answered that for you. Do you have an SNMP monitor for printer monitoring via OIDs? I do have SNMP OID-based monitoring, not specifically for printers. So, SNMP is kind of, the world's your oyster, right? You need to just target the right class, and usually that's a node in SCOM, and then you just need to provide the OID. So I do have fragment examples of that. Monitor SNMP poll OID value integer. So again, this is very specific. It treats the value as an integer. If you wanted to just bring data back and compare it as a string, you'd have to tweak this fragment and create another one that does it as a string. So the most common that I run into is integer based, because we're usually looking at performance data. Does MP author allow event ID range? So that's not an MP author thing, that's a SCOM thing, and it's because MP author just uses the modules that are built into SCOM, unless you create your own modules. So the event ID field does support regex. So you can MP author, I don't know if MP author can do that natively, if that's what they're asking in the MP author UI. I know that you can do it in a fragment.
So Kevin, let me jump in there for a minute. Today's session, we've got lots of questions. This is exactly what we wanted. We have solicited people to raise their hand if they have a question, and so I'd like to try that format.
Oh, sure.
It's the first time we've done it, so this is a little bit of an experiment here, but we do have a few hands raised, and I would like to unmute those people. So if you've got your hand raised and you have a question ready, just be prepared. So I'm going to first start with Andre Agibel. Your hand is raised. I am just going to unmute you, and so we'll see how this goes, Andre. So, Andre, you should be able to speak now. Do you have a question? Yeah, so now that didn't go as planned. It seems Andre is not there. So now we need to remute. And Andre has disappeared from the list altogether, but I can hear a little bit of background noise there. So let's see if we can. Okay, so he is muted. Let's try the next one and see if we can't get this going with Chris McIntyre, I believe I have that right. So Chris, I am going to unmute you so that you can ask Kevin or Mike a question here. So Chris, you should be able to speak now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Certainly can.
Yeah, here you go.
Okay, great. So I have kind of a unique situation I'm trying to resolve here. So I've been asked to do real-time security auditing of our domain controllers in our environment based on the security event log, which is pretty straightforward. I've created a number of rules to, parse those logs and generate alerts, and that works great. The issue I'm having is maintenance mode. Obviously, since this is auditing, they want that to be running all the time. And, sometimes you have an outage or whatever, and with the Active Directory Management Pack, you tend to put all of the domain controllers into maintenance mode to prevent, replication alerts and things like that. And, of course, when you put it into maintenance mode, then it turns off the auditing rules as well. So brainstorming that, I was kind of hoping to be able to, I don't know if it's like a clone of the Windows Domain Controller class that's not hosted by Windows Computer, so that if somebody put the Windows Computer into maintenance mode, those workflows would still run. So I don't know if you've run into that before.
I totally have. Not pretty. So I have a blog post called How to Create a Class That Will Not Go into Maintenance Mode.
Oh, great.
So I've answered your question exactly. However, it does not work as intended. So,
Okay.
So it's kind of scary. It took me quite a bit of research to figure out how to do it, but it is possible to create a class and then create a relationship to tell that unhosted class to be hosted by an agent. The Windows Computer class actually works that way. And then that since it is not since it's contained by the agent, but the way that I designed it, it will not go into maintenance mode. Instances of that class will not go into maintenance mode when you put the agent into maintenance mode. So that workflow will continue to run. However, when you put a computer fully into maintenance mode, meaning the Windows Computer, the health service watcher, all those things,
Right.
then one of the things that happens is the health service that goes into maintenance mode and the workflow that sends data to the management server, it goes into maintenance mode. So what will happen is that your custom rules will still be running. They will still be generating alerts or collecting those events. However, they will not show up in SCOM until the server comes out of maintenance mode.
Okay, so there's queue up.
They queue up, that's right.
That'll probably still work.
Negative side effect. So if that's important, then have at it.
Thanks.
Okay, no problem. Do we have somebody next? Or do you want me to continue?
I forgot to unmute myself. Okay.
Okay.
So yes, we got Chris muted. So Chris, you're safe now. We do have another question coming in, but so I'm going to unmute Gino. And Gino, you'll be able to ask your question. I'll give you the go-ahead as soon as you're unmuted. Okay, Gino, you can go ahead and ask your question. Somebody is typing that is...
That's me. Sorry.
No problem. I just wanted to make sure. So, Gino, we're not hearing you speak. I'm assuming that means you don't have a question. So let's now go back to our regular question format. But if you do have a question, raise your hand, and we'll give you a chance to speak with Kevin and Mike.
Okay. Cool. So does Fragments have the option to filter the events for monitor rules based on the parameters as seen in the event? Absolutely. So there's no limitation on Fragments. Anything that's available to do in the console or in any authoring tool is totally available in Fragments. In fact, I'd argue Fragments have more options available to you because there are so many things that are available in the XML and in the modules that are not exposed by authoring tools. So, so the answer to that question is absolutely yes. If you're monitoring multiple services for an application, what would be the best practice to create single service class and utilize discovery? I don't like that model. Some people do, but there's a model, a concept of creating a services class. This is what, if you use the Windows service template, which I hate, by the way. If you use that template, that's what it does. It creates instances of a services class. It then binds that or scopes the discovery to a group, so you only discover services on specific machines, and then it passes things like service name to the monitor. So it creates incredibly efficient XML, but it doesn't give you application separation. And so you can actually do that, but you would be creating like a new class for each application. So I'm not a fan of that personally. I think it's nice if people really just don't understand and don't want to get into any type of advanced authoring, but it's certainly possible. Is there a way to write a service monitor that alerts after it's been stopped for X minutes instead of alerting immediately? So actually, the built-in service monitor in SCOM does not alert immediately. So the built-in monitor in SCOM runs every 30 seconds. You would have to go all the way through the data sources to understand this. The built-in service monitor in SCOM, the service module, it runs every 30 seconds. And it waits for 2 consecutive samples of service down. The problem is that the people who wrote that library didn't expose those options as overridable parameters in the monitor type. And so because of that, you can't change it. And so this is a perfect example of why I would want to do a fragment with a custom service monitor. My customers have done that, and we expose those as overridable parameters. So you can say, hey, check every 30 seconds, but wait for this service, wait for 20 consecutive samples, which would result in 10 minutes of delay before generating the alert. So that's really powerful for services that stop as a part of their normal operation. So it was just kind of like an oversight when we wrote the library. So SCOM skills match count. Yeah, so Jonathan has written an article on match count. So Larry provided that for people to look at if you want to see an example of it. We have to limit the size of unsealed MP. What about quantity? There is no limit on quantity of MPs. So I would much rather have 1,000 small MPs than 20 huge MPs. Do you have an SNMP monitor for monitoring network devices like F5? I don't, but there are like a ton of really good F5 management packs. So I do have an SNMP monitor that's based on an OID that you totally could write custom for your F5, but I recommend look in the community. F5 wrote a management pack, and there's been a lot of community MPs that have surfaced for F5 load balancer devices that are really cool. Have you designed a fragment for Cisco Nexus switches? No, I haven't. I've not done any fragments for specific object types, but I have written lots of articles for how to create classes based on an OID for a specific object type. So if you wanted to create your own class for a Cisco Nexus switch and you didn't want to use all the built-in stuff from SCOM, I've written articles for how to do that, and you could totally make that a fragment. Match count, a bunch of people provided that. Is it possible to put a single monitor rule in maintenance mode for certain repeated period in the configuration tab property? No, I wish there was. I absolutely wish there was. The only way to put an individual ruler monitor in maintenance mode would be to create a custom class just for that ruler monitor, and then because we put instances of a class in maintenance mode, we don't put individual workflows in maintenance mode. I wish that, I've got this huge wish list, as you can imagine. One of my wishes, I wish there was an option on workflows to tell it to ignore maintenance mode and not to observe maintenance mode, not to unload. That would solve a lot of people's problems, like the one that we heard earlier, but we don't have that. And in addition, the ability to put an individual one, you just can't do it. Is it okay to point event provider modules to security log? It's questionable. So, Ian, thanks for that. So, is it okay? Here's the problem. One of the things you'll notice, there is not a single management pack provided by Microsoft that uses the security event log as an event data source. And there's a very, very good reason for that. Monitoring the security event log, the number of events per second that parse through that log is massive. And if you write an overly complex rule that looks for security events in the security event log on your domain controllers, if you do bad things unknowingly, not intentionally, you can create a situation where you'll spike lsas.exe to 100%, and that domain controller will not respond to external requests. So that's not SCOM doing that. That's you doing that, because what it has to do with how we resolve certain parameters. So it's very important when you're writing things to the security event log that you keep the rules as simple as possible and you test it in production environments carefully when you do your implementation, and you should monitor for lsas.exe to make sure that you're not impacting the server when you do it. So I say yes, it's okay. We have tons of customers that do it. Just you have to be careful. You have to test. You have to make sure you're not impacting your production environments. Okay, would it be possible to monitor all errors in the application log or any other event log irrespective of event ID and source? Yeah, I mean, you totally can do that. I don't recommend it, but you can create workflows that, that pass a wildcard for star.star for the event ID and don't even include event source. Yeah, it's certainly possible to do. I can't imagine how noisy that would be, but knock yourself out. Is there a limitation on the number of groups in a management pack? No, there's not. There's no hard limits like a lot of things in SCOM, but when we had the test team that was developing SCOM, back in the 2007 days, and moving forward, we internally only test up to 500 groups. So from a performance perspective, keep that in mind. I've had customers that had like 1,100 groups in the past, and we didn't observe any major issues from that. The only thing I do recommend is I have a blog post on registry keys for management servers, and one of those reg keys is slowing down group population and setting it to every 15 minutes, because the default is like looking for changes every 30 seconds. And if you have really complex regular expressions in your groups, that's more harmful than a large number of groups with simple expressions. Okay, next, when working with SCCM, with SCOM, can fragments be put data from SCCM? Yeah, I mean, as long as we have a data source, you can create a fragment that does anything. So we just need to know what the common data source would be. If that's go query the SCCM database and pull data out of that for monitoring, we can do that too. I actually have a fragment already that does a PowerShell script-based monitor that runs a SQL query. I have a flapping disk monitor on one server in a group. Agent repair hasn't worked. Any troubleshooting tips? It's probably out of scope for this conversation. Feel free to send me a note on my blog if you have a flapping disk monitor. Most of the time, flapping disk monitors are because somebody authored something incorrectly without understanding multiple instances. Security log parsing on the DC and grab all events questions may look at, yeah, I totally agree, Brett, that OMS is probably the more appropriate solution when we get into questions about like security event collection and analysis, because OMS is much more aligned to those types of things.
Hey, Kevin, I'm just going to jump in there and see. We are now at 11:30. It's our published lunch time, but we're okay continuing with some questions, but I don't want to take advantage of your time here. I'm sure you've got a lot of important things to do, but certainly you're welcome to continue answering questions. It doesn't look like there's that many more, but
okay.
It's up to you.
I only see one more, so I'm happy to stay on and answer any questions. Yeah.
Actually, Kevin, there's I think an important one that's still showing up on my list here from Konstantin, and he asked, is there a difference to the snippets in VSAE? I think
yeah, so how do I compare and contrast fragments and snippets? So it's a common question I get. For people familiar with snippets, snippets are awesome. I have a blog post on snippets. Just so people that are listening, let me grab that real quick. Well, that's Visual Studio. Here we go. So here is, how to use snippets in Visual Studio to write lots of workflows. So there's an example of a blog post that you can go search and find. Snippets in Visual Studio are a way to create lots of repetitive monitoring based on a model really fast. Snippets have the advanced capability of reading a data source like a CSV file. So you could literally create 100 alert generating rules and nothing would be faster. However, you still have to provide that data somewhere, like in a CSV or something that has all the unique things that you want to use. So these fragments are very similar to snippets, but snippets kind of use a template. So one of the questions I get is, why did you write fragments? Why didn't you just write snippet templates for all these? Because then we could use them either or. And it's a great question. I think when I started, I was just trying to keep things as simple as possible because I was trying to get people to come along on this journey of fragments with me because the challenging part was the library didn't exist. So I wanted as simple a solution as possible. You can totally take any of these fragments and convert them into a snippet template. So if you like snippets and you like Visual Studio, I say knock yourself out. I personally have only had the need to use snippets one time. I had a customer that wanted me to rewrite a Wins management pack because Microsoft had stopped supporting it, and they wanted it brought forward because they were continuing to use Wins on like Windows 2008 and 2008 R2 servers, and so I had to rewrite the Wins management pack. So I used snippets to export the current management pack and then change it and bring it into this new one. And that's the example that I used in that blog post. So totally possible. You know, you can convert fragments into snippets if you want to. I think I just was trying to keep things very, very simple because most customers don't need that massive amount of repetition. All right, next question is, I have an MP with custom MP with groups, rules, etc. And I made some changes and I import the modified MP, but I did not update the previous version. Just add another one and keep both. Is it easy to prepare changes, rename all objects in this change MP? So I think I understand. If you make any changes to an unsealed MP, it doesn't matter what the version is or any of that stuff. When you bring in your new MP, it just overwrites whatever's there. We do recommend you always increment the version of the management pack, because if you don't, there are actually some bugs where the agent will evaluate it and say, oh, well, this is not a new MP, so I'm not going to load it. So you definitely should always increment the version. However, if you make a structural change to the MP, and you change something like the ID of the management pack, that is now a different management pack. And so even though it contains maybe direct copies of all the rules, when you bring that in, it no longer will update your existing one or replace it. It is a separate MP. So it's very important that you maintain your IDs. I have had situations where I want to change the ID of a management pack. Maybe I downloaded a community solution and I don't like their naming structure, so I change all of that. It's very simple. I just delete the previous MP from the management group and then I bring mine in. Are there any simple solutions for SCOM and Remedy? If you mean auto ticketing from SCOM to Remedy, I don't know what the simplest solutions would probably be, like if Remedy can congest an email or suck data in from files and you do like a command channel. But other than that, Orchestrator, Microsoft Orchestrator, has the ability to generate tickets to BMC Remedy from alerts. Are there any advantage of using VSAE over MP Studio? You know, advantage. I would say VSAE probably is less bound by what's possible, because at the end of the day, it's like an XML editor with some visual representations of modules and things like that. It has some benefits for very advanced MP authors. However, if you compare and contrast to something like MP Studio, they both have different features and different capabilities. So I think you would almost have to evaluate each on its own merits and determine what you need out of an authoring tool. I think both have value. So, and I use both. Let's see, MP authors can see if something have changed in an unsealed MP and when that change was made in the SCOM console. Unfortunately, no. The best argument I can make for that is you should have an unsealed MP backup solution in place in any production environment. And there's a community MP on System Center Central that does a great job of that. One of the challenges with SCOM, and we've heard this complaint a lot, is that we don't do very good auditing over who made changes. So there's some community solutions out there that show you who logged into the console at a certain time, and then there are events in the event log of when a management pack was updated, so you can kind of draw, connect some dots and try to figure out who made a change, but that's very difficult. Let's see. I managed 2007 to 2012. Any suggestions on having alerts viewable and manageable in only one of the consoles? Nope. So we support connected management groups, which would show alerts in a single console, but we don't support, it may work, I've never tried it, but we don't support connected management groups across 2 different versions like that. So that would be quite difficult.
Sorry, Kevin, let me jump in if you don't mind. Are you done with that question?
Yeah.
Okay, so just back to the previous question Simon had asked regarding changes in an unsealed MP being made in the SCOM console. If you are using MP Studio, which has a store database, you can run an automated backup. MP Studio will check for any unsealed management packs that have changed in your management group. We'll bring it into the store database and seamlessly compare to the previous copy. So if changes were made in the SCOM console, we'll still be able to catch what was changed, okay, based on the timing of it added to the MP Studio store database. We can't track who made the change and the time of the change. But if the change is made in MP Studio, so you can use MP Studio for creating overrides and modifying and stuff, if you make the changes in MP Studio, we'll also be able to report and audit who made the changes, exactly what the changes were made. So to answer your question, we will get some information if the change was made in the SCOM console, and good information, just not who. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, great info. I totally forgot about that. Okay, so last question I see is, are there any large benefits separating discovery and monitoring into different management packs? Okay, so Nick, this is kind of personal to me. My answer is, and again, I don't speak for Microsoft, but my answer is absolutely not. That whole practice began based on fundamental theories when SCOM was first being written, and the idea was that all the agents would download a library and a discovery MP, and that was very small and lightweight, and then they would evaluate whether they had they contained a class, or they would evaluate that discovery data, and they would only download the big fat monitoring MP if it was necessary and if they had that. However, it didn't work out. It was an idea that never fundamentally actually worked, because the reality is almost every monitoring MP ever made contains some reference to Windows Computer, and everybody is a Windows computer. So everybody downloaded all the monitoring MPs anyway. So to me, it's worthless, and that you'll see a lot of the new MPs coming out that are being written from the ground up, they don't do that. So when I go to customers and I see them following our model, just because Microsoft did something early on doesn't necessarily mean you should continue that practice. So me personally, I just think it overly complicates things. It doesn't create any sense of efficiencies. So especially if we're doing custom applications, I see no reason to separate libraries, discoveries, and monitoring into separate management packs. So I've been trying to kind of change that impression as I've been exposed to that in customers. SCOM 2012 can connect to SCOM 2016 console using connected management groups. Okay, so Michael Evans says that works. I don't know if we support that or not. I'd have to research that. But there's a lot of things that work that we just haven't ever tested or thought of. So is it, let's see. So I think everything's been answered. Yeah.
Hey, Kevin. Sorry, I just answered that question as you were about to.
Perfect.
Yeah. So, okay, that's awesome. We are, a solid 10 minutes over what we had planned for the Ask the Experts. And it was an interesting experiment to see how many might actually want to be unmuted. We may try this one more time, but it seems the most popular way is to send those questions in, type them in. And to the audience, thank you for submitting all those awesome questions. Anything that isn't answered today, we'll attempt to get it answered and sent off to everybody afterwards. And on behalf of our
Can I just read one more question, Randy, that a participant asked? It was a question about how to protect the intellectual property in a management pack. It's a customer from Europe, and he couldn't stay on it.
You can't. Nobody can. So, you know, when you write this cool intellectual property, I don't care if you seal it. There are tools to unseal it. There's no way to protect it. Lots of competitors have taken the stuff that we've written in management packs and have used it. You know, the only thing that Microsoft does that is really a EULA. That's why when you download management packs, they're an MSI file, and you have to run this installer and agree to the EULA, which basically says you're not going to steal all this, you know, intellectual property. That's really all you can do. There's no easy way to do that.